Hello everyone, my name is Very Innerlight. My creator have been making Kigurumi masks for more than 16 years already, and today we shall talk about how to make Kigurumi eyes. This is the second part of our two-part lecture about how to make and implement eyes into Kigurumi masks. The first part was about eye geometry. Again, this is the context. The first part was this, and in this part we will explore different eye techniques, their advantages, disadvantages, special perks, and all that stuff. So let's get started. So the quick recap of the first part. Again, this presentation will be linked down below. So now let's move to eye techniques, and it's a lot of ways to translate the geometry of the eye into actual physical object, and also add some special effects to that stuff. And some techniques are pretty universal, while others would be useful just in a handful of occasions. And to decide which technique to use, you will have to think about not just the vibe of what your character should should feel like, but also the implementations on how the mask would be used. For example, will the eyes be removable or not? It's very important. By the way, there is, again, I remind you that there is a lecture about how the eyes can be installed into the mask and how the different methods of fixing the eyes inside. It's another big topic. And will the mask get wet during usage? So basically, would you swim in the mask or not? Would you use the mask under rain or not? All that stuff. Would you clean the mask with water or not? Or something like that. Also, you will have to consider if it would be okay for performer to be able to not to see through the eyes, or you would want to leave the area of as much area for the performer to see what is happening around, because usually when you play the Kigurumi mask on top of your head, you have some extra small slits about at the top of the eyes, or even sometimes high, so you could see around what is happening. But if your eyes are actually see-through and you can see through your eyes, you can also see what is happening around your legs. And this is very useful when you go outside, or if there are a lot of short people around. So again, you need to consider this part. And different techniques have different answers to this problem. Again, so that's why it's so much techniques, and some of them are universal, some of them are not universal, some of them fit some criteria, others fit another criteria, and all that stuff we shall learn here. So the first historically and the easiest part of the eyes is basically the eyes printed on photo paper. So thick glossy photo paper. Well, and this stuff is usually, again, it's easy to implement. Photo paper is bendy, and you can print pretty any design. Here you can see the Build-Up Studio Sigma with some kind of this stuff, and of course you can use not just a photo paper, you can print eyes on plastic, on a vinyl stickers. So And if you just use that, this can be considered something like this method. And because it is just a flat design, it doesn't allow you to have the natural highlights, so you need to design highlights into the eye itself, into the eye image, and print all the highlights and all the shadows on top of the image. The interesting thing about these eyes is that the black area of the eyes can be cut out to make some slits, so you could see through them. And for example, in this eye image, so you can see it's pretty black, like a big black element. Now, as you can see, there is a mesh that covers that area at the back of the black area, so you can see through that mesh, but there is a catch that, well, it may be not seen well on camera, but in real life it's pretty obvious that there is a mesh. So I also tried a different approach. In this case I used the automotive film. So it's tinted automotive self-adhesive film, and so you can see it's just highlights, and it's not that noticeable. So you see I especially do this so it catches some real highlights. And again, if you would look through this stuff, well, it's a bit too and you even can use, for example, the sunglasses as a black part of these elements. If you will look here at this image more closely, you will notice that this black line is actually a cutout. And also there is a technique that makes these cutouts less visible, is that when you cut out some black areas out of the eye designs, for example, eye designs like this, so you cut out the black area out of, and then you take the black marker and paint this border from the inside. So you do not paint them on their face surface, but you paint on the border of the paper, so you make the edge of the paper black, and so it won't be as noticeable, and you get the better result. If you want it to be water resistant, you will have to print this stuff not on a paper but on a plastic, something like that. And speaking about the design that you can use this, again, these eyes usually look cartoony or anime-ish, but you kind of can use this design with any type of masks, but it simply won't look as nice in real life as different kind of eyes with the realistic looking masks. So let's move to the next method. And the next method is stickers or decals. Well, unfortunately I hadn't found the pictures of this method, and I also do not use this kind of method directly, because this method is usually good for masks with a flat surface, when you do not cut out the shape of the eyes, something like that. It's just the flat, smooth surface, and you put a sticker or decal on that surface and call it a day. The biggest advantage of this method is that the eyes these kind of eyes weigh absolutely nothing, and they are the thinnest variant that is possible. But again, because you probably would cut out eye shape, you will not use this. You would either opt to the paper eyes, or you would opt to mesh eyes, or something like that. And again, because it's just a flat picture, all the shadows and all the highlights would be necessary to be here like in the previous variant. The other variant, and here we have a couple of images by Studio Fractal, is when you actually paint the eyes on top of the mask. So you sculpt the eyes, and in this case the shape of the eyes can be any. It can be spherical, it can be flat, it can be follow me. Well, follow me would be a bit more difficult to paint all that, because you will have to paint it inside the concave shape, but again, it's possible. It's perfectly possible. And the biggest drawback of this method is that you actually need a skill to paint the eyes on top of the mask. And again, this variant would be lightest, and it would have consume no space at all in the mask, because it's basically a layer of paint, and it can be water resistant. If the whole mask is water resistant, the eyes would be water resistant as well. So for example, the mask is covered by clear coat, and so nothing would can wash the eyes out of it. If you are going to make this eyes, you will have to plan whether those eyes will be see-through, and how the performer would be able to see through these eyes at the stage of sculpting the mask or designing a 3D model of the mask. So you will have to do all that slits and holes beforehand, before you actually paint the eyes on. Or you will have to just abandon the idea to make the eyes see-through. And again, if you want to somehow hide that holes and that elements, you can put a black see-through film, or sunglasses, or cutout of sunglasses at the back, and use that, or a mesh, somehow something like a black mesh behind the eyes. So this is the method. The next method that becomes more and more common nowadays is the method when you use a mesh. And I have a couple of variants here. So as you can see, a couple of variants, this variant and this variant. And this can be made, it's usually a flat geometry, but also a follow me geometry, because well, follow me geometry can be implemented just by offsetting the surface of the eye back inside the mask. Or in this case, for example, I made the eye out of aluminum and put the image of an eye. It's a sticker, it's vinyl sticker that I glued to the surface of perforated aluminum sheet of material. And in this case we have, well, focus. So in this case we have a plastic mesh, and I applied a sticker on top of the plastic mesh, the iris on top of the plastic mesh as a sticker. And this, for example, this mesh in particular is a mesh that is used for protecting computers from the dust. They are nowadays, those meshes can be purchased in white or black and have a different density, as well as aluminum meshes also have different density. So how does this? And if you want to have the image, you also cannot use a sticker or not place a photo paper cutout iris on top of that, but you can directly, sometimes you can directly print the image on top of the eye. Or in case of you have a sticker, you can just cut out just some of areas and leave the other areas uncut out, or another method like I used here, for example, I just pierce them. I just pierce them holes. Some holes I used a needle and pierced those holes through the eye image, through the sticker, to the back of the eye, and well, again, it looks pretty fine in this way. And usually it's not that noticeable because you have just enough holes to see through this eye, and not much of them to disturb the overall look. This kind of usually lightweight, thin, and easy to make, and also this kind of eyes are usually waterproof by default. There is an interesting method for these eyes, especially if you use the plastic mesh. The plastic mesh is white from the back side, and this white color may disturb your vision. To make the vision better, you can paint the inside of the back side of the mesh, the side that is facing the performer's eyes, with a black color. So on the front it will still be white, but on the black there won't be any extra highlights that would disturb your vision and that would interfere with the actual picture that you are trying to see. Well, you can also implement this method for ball joint doll kicks if, as I've mentioned in the part with eye geometry, sometimes you can just use an acrylic lens with the iris and place it on top of the flat surface, and that surface can be a mesh, so you can see through this mesh and navigate pretty good. And the next kind of eye techniques, that the kind of techniques that I usually use for a lot of time now, and I tried. It's my technique that the see-through eyes and see-through irises. This stuff, well, the finished variant looks something like this. So you can see it's a bit glossy. Well, you can use just the iris, not the whole eye. So this is the example of this stuff. And also, if you notice, these eyes in my eyes usually utilize this particular technique. And how does this technique is made? Well, the first thing is this. It's an eye image. In this regard is an iris image, but it can be the whole eye, that is printed on a see-through plastic film. And because the ink is a bit rough, and you cannot clearly see through the rough surfaces, it is laminated with glossy lamination, and also lamination makes it more sturdy, makes it more stable. It's not just like this, it's a bit more predictable. And at the back of this stuff I put this. And what is this? It's the mirror film, the see-through mirror film. I usually use automotive mirror films that are self-adhesive. So this is placed at the back, and see, here is the magic. Well, magic just get dropped to the floor. So, as you can see, this is how it works, how it looks. And usually within the eyes, my eyes are the same as this stuff with some extra elements. So you get, oh, it dropped again. You get this nice look, and again this look is completely see-through. You can see what is happening behind. Well, and the interesting thing about this stuff is that the more ink we have at a particular area, the harder it is to see through this area. So we try to put less ink and to put some extra highlights, so it is easier to see through highlights in this case than through the colored areas. So here you see the full story, and again this is lightweight, this is waterproof. I personally prefer to use this technique with glossy looking eyes. Is one of the next techniques, but you can use this technique basically on its own. And for example, in this case where just the iris gets this silver backside and the rest is white, I actually painted the rest of the area from the backside with the white paint and glued this gloss element to the back, so it becomes to look like this. By the way, this technique is not just useful for the eyes. If you make a gem or something like that, and it's a gem that had a flat area that is going to rest against some surface, and put the mirror film or something like that at the back. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot to mention, instead of laminating, I recently tried this clean film, and this clean film is a special film for repairing vinyl toys. It's thick, it's a thick glossy. By the way, there are glossy and matte films for vinyl toy repairing stuff, so make sure that you get the glossy one, and it's pretty thick. It's even sometimes more thick than some of lamination, and it has a pretty serious layer of glue at one of the sides. It's self-adhesive again, and there is a pretty healthy amount of adhesive, so it would fill all the imperfections of the ink. But just keep in mind that you will need to glue this stuff on top of the ink side of the film. With eye image, basically. And well, it's a bit less clear than the lamination. Well, If your eyesight is not good, and you may not notice it, but if your eyesight is pretty good, that you may notice that. So keep that in mind. Lamination is a tiny bit better, but this stuff is easier to implement, especially if you have a bowl of water and you glue everything together underwater, so there is no air bubbles that would disturb your image and so on. Again, for example, this stuff was glued under the air, and you can see the air bubbles in this, and if you glue it underwater, that's not the case. The next is resin eyes. We are steadily approaching eyes with a spherical geometry, but it's not the eye that you can see in my image right now. Resin eyes is a technique that is taken from ball joint dolls, and also this technique is used by fursuiters when there is for realistic pursuits, when there are eyes for realistic pursuits. And this stuff is great because these kind of eyes are actually look like real eyes. For example, this is my attempt to make an eyes for a huge dinosaur costume. This is the eye from Instagram channel Elka Bird. I recommend you to go to that Instagram channel because, well, a lot of interesting inspiration, a lot of the channel is specialized on making this kind of resin eyes, and they have a ton of different ideas on how to make the eye as a whole, how to make the iris, how different shapes of pupils and so on. So very interesting. So I encourage you to go there, and also they have some process photos and process videos of how these eyes are made. This actually usually sculpted, so very great stuff. Shout out to them. And again, to make this eyes, you can use a clear resin. It can be epoxy resin, UV resin, there are clear polyurethanes. I used the clear polyether resin for this stuff. And again, it can be the whole eye or can be just the iris that is usually used in Chinese ball joint dolls, ball joint doll masks. They just have this, and of course you can use not just pour the resin into the mold. You can use the acrylic lens if you happen to find the lens of the side that fits your eye design. Again, I've mentioned it, acrylic lens, the image of an eye from the back, and the white background. What's interesting about this stuff is that you can pour your resin in layers and put different glitter between the layers, and put a different or paint some different elements between the layers, and thus have the very deep, very interesting looking eye that would play with different will have a lot of different sides will be very interesting to look at and to explore. Basically, people will just get glued to your eyes and will look into your eyes until you go away. To make them, you will need a mold. Usually it's a silicone mold, or you can use the bubble. This is, for example, this is the plastic bubble of the my standard diameter 70 millimeters. It's basically the acrylic plastic bubble and you can pour the resin into that bubble and then add the eye image, either paint it or add the printed picture of this and pour the rest and paint it with white, something like that. Or you either can do all the same stuff with just a silicone mold and then take the eye out of silicone mold and probably in this case cover it with a clear coat or cover it with an extra layer of resin to smooth out all its surface. By the way, my personal experience with optical epoxy resin required to cover it with a clear coat, otherwise it became some kind of rough just after the contact with water. So in case of epoxy resin, some clear coat may be required. So that's happened. The disadvantage of this ice is that this ice cannot have a lot of special effects. So you can light those eyes from the behind. You can even post a computer screen behind this eyes to add some extra elements, but those elements would be distorted. And you can put some extra lights around this eyes to give this extra stuff, but you cannot make this eyes see-through because the light gets bent too much. Just imagine you have a lens in front of your eyes and a big lens in front of the eye that basically bends the light all over the place. So this is one disadvantage, and the second disadvantage that these eyes are usually pretty heavy. Well, you have the big chunk of resin and they need their space. Well, you do not need to make the whole sphere of the eye, but just that part of the sphere that gets exposed is also can be big enough. So keep that in mind. By the way, as I remember, one of my favorite artists, Colin Christian, once made a mask and made this kind of eyes for his mask. And well, he's a sculptor. He makes a lot of magnificent sculptures in a certain genre, and he makes this kind of eyes for their sculptures. So look for him in Google and admire his work, please. And now the glass-looking eyes. The glass-looking eyes is the ones that you can see in me. So, well, for example, one of other examples of glass-looking eyes, and this is the recent examples of glass-looking eyes. And of course, you will be able to see those pretty frequently in the video about eye assemblies. And this is basically the realistic looking eyes, and the eyes that are made to, again, one of my inventions, that is made to represent the ball joint doll eyes, but on top of that you also have them see-through. So, well, here this is the image of one of these particular eyes, one of the same. And this kind of eyes can utilize either spherical geometry or follow B geometry. And since the outer surface of the eyes is a clear dome, those eyes captures natural highlights and natural shadows pretty well. And again, looks great on realistic Kigurumis and ball joint doll Kigurumis, and I've noticed that these eyes look better in person than on photo. So if it looks like that, on your computer screen, and in person it looks even better because it captures all that stuff very well. The contents of this eye is, well, pretty straightforward. You have a clear dome of a certain diameter. I use 70mm diameter, but you can use the smaller diameters or the larger diameters depending on the size of your masks and the size and the style you are trying to implement. Behind that there is a usually white, well, sometimes it can be another color, but it's a sclera, the dome, the sclera. And in the back of the sclera, so you can see the shape. This focus camera is the shape. So here I placed the iris, and the iris is made by the see-through technology. So again, the technology, well, I used this stuff. It's placed to the back, and all that is glued together. This usually is how my eyes are basically made. And by the way, these particular elements, also have the magnets, magnetic connections. These elements are at my Thingiverse. You can download them and play with them. There are some extra tools for making these eyes. Oh, by the way, again, this is the simple spherical eye. So you can see it's basically some kind of sphere. And this is the sclera for a see-through eye. So you can see it's different. It's a concave shape. So again, if you look at the eye, this eye, you can notice that it is a concave. Well, please do not, please focus this camera. So you can see, and this stuff, this is actually my standard follow me eyes, and because of magnetic connections, I can interchange these eyes with the other eyes, and they always will look like intended. You see the thickness of these eyes, and because there is a space inside those eyes, then they can fog up, and this is a little problem. So I put silica gel in there, inside there, so it won't fog up too fast. I also make a special breathing techniques inside the mask, like respirators, so they also won't fog up that easily. And also it's usually somehow waterproof, but depending on the glue, depending on materials, depending on how accurate you make them, there can be some leakage, and underwater these eyes look a bit weird. Well, trust me, I tried. It looks like you have just a lens instead of the eye. Unlike the other method that preserves the image of the eye, this have a pretty funny effect underwater. Sculpted eyes and eyes that are 3D printed or 2.5D printed. Well, so it is very rare. By the way, this is from the Elka Bird Instagram account I've mentioned earlier. This is from Undergod GP Kigurumi mask makers from Japan, and this is from a person who made robot masks. So it can be, well, I mashed together sculpted and 3D printed. There are two different techniques, but basically they achieve the same, and those techniques have the same advantages and disadvantages actually. They will look great on ball joint dolls, Kigurumis, on monster, alien, robot characters, but on the regular anime girl characters, so those eyes may look a bit weird because they, as you can see, it gets a bit strange angles and strange highlights. So you will need to be careful with that stuff in case of Kigurumi, in case of anime girl Kigurumi masks. And unless you have the, if you would 3D print this, there are already voxel 3D printers that can print the whole eye. For example, several years ago on Adam Savage tested their, he was invited to Veta workshop, and they showed eyes that was completely printed with color. It's a voxel color printed with color, with all that see-through stuff, with all the resin stuff, and all they had to do is just to polish the surface to get the final eye with all the structures, and it was some kind of Stratasys 3D printer, very special. And actually you can have this, the same result with a sculpting or 3D printing, but you just will have to paint it by hand and then fill it with resin. This kind of eyes actually can be made see-through if you plan it accordingly and plan it from the start. Plan the creaks and plan some tiny holes in the design, so there would be some spaces between elements, and you would see. And some of elements can be made out of, let's say, the sunglasses again, or some can be made out of film, or just straightforward creaks and cracks in the eye design. So you may do this stuff. Again, this is relatively heavy and thick. It can be made water resistant, but if you would implement electronics like in this design, then it won't be, for obvious reasons. So this is it. And again, as for me, I use this for my smaller printouts to have the idea how the eyes would look, because I do not want to paint this stuff. I want to just print out and see how it looks. But again, you can use it into the final mask and it can look great as well. It just will take you some extra time to sculpt or to design and 3D print this, and you will have to actually, usually you will have to actually paint it, And unless you have the access to some kind of resin printers, or lately there is a 3D printer that is 2.5D printer. Basically it's a standard printer, but that can print print some thin bas reliefs. UV-E1, something like that. And now let's move to another variant very close to this. It's eyes that are made of layered stuff. I also combined a couple of techniques here. One of the kit bashing, that you just you not sculpt the elements, you just find a lot of elements in different places and then glue them together in a certain way. Cut something off, glue it together and get the result. And in this regard I actually have one of these. So this is how it looks. This one is a kit bash of magnets, the sunglass, and a cut out of a plastic vase. So it's a pretty easy stuff. But of course you can use a lot more stuff. You can use like parts of Gundam kits or some clockwork elements like gears of the clocks and put them together, and also something like that. Some parts of electronics, some dead microchips, and a lot of stuff, whatever. Do not restrict your imagination in this regard. And the other thing is that, for example, the caravans made this in latex, out of sheets of latex. So you have a lot of sheets of latex, and my two very first masks actually also utilizes this technique. I used sunglasses, and on top of that I put layers upon layers upon layers of different films. For example, there is several layers of pink UV reactive film. UV reactive in this case is that it lights up in ultraviolet. So I put several layers of it to have different degrees of this pinkish color on top of sunglasses and get this result. You also can mix this with other techniques as well. For example, you can not just put a layer of a sheet of latex cut out to a certain point, but so a picture, something printed, a picture printed on top of photo paper, and put it, implement it into the design. And of course you can use the gaps or some holes, or pierce some holes through this design so it would be see-through. Or again, like me in my first designs, to use sunglasses. And the geometry of these eyes also can be any geometry, but note that because you use some physical stuff and combine it together, this can be pretty bulky and pretty heavy. So again, keep this in mind while making this design. Waterproofness, thickness, weight, etc. geometry depends on the materials you use in this case. And paints that you use, if you would use some paints, maybe you won't use paints, or maybe you will. So this is a pretty flexible stuff, but it's not as flexible as actual sculpting on 3D printing, because you have to utilize the properties of the material you add to this stuff. But again, it's very flexible for some strange characters as well. The next thing I would like to mention is the electronic eyes. It's basically eyes that are made with basically the monitors. It can be as you can see, this is my eyes that I made a while ago with next-gen TFT displays. So, and again, you can use TFT, OLED, even e-paper and so on to do this. And usually these kind of eyes are completely flat. By the way, pretty interesting Yuki cosplay Twitter. There are a lot of funny technical stuff there. A lot of funny electronics in their masks. And also there do exist flexible OLED displays, but in case of flexible OLED displays, this is usually a bit difficult to use because flexible OLED displays require special drivers and then special programming, so it's not that straightforward. These eyes are completely not see-through, and there is almost no way to make them see-through in any significant way. So people who utilize these eyes are either use different places to see through or just straightforward use the micro screens and micro displays inside their masks. What is about why do you would want to do this? Well, first of all, you can have the actual eye that can move in different directions. Well, either in different directions at the same time or in the same direction at any given time in place. There are also some libraries for Arduino that allows you to track the eyes, the actual eyes of the performer inside the mask, and accordingly change the images on the screens. So those libraries and those projects on Instructables are for more than a decade ago already. What else in this stuff is that, you can change eye images on the fly. For example, again, eye image can be moved, etc., can be controlled, but there is a big drawback. The first is that it's usually completely flat, and it's usually difficult to find the screens that are big enough to fit in, to cover the whole of the eye, but small enough to fit in the mask, and that was a bit tricky. Also for me, as you can see here, I actually had to cut the corners of this display to fit it in the mask. Luckily there was no wiring at the corner, so it was safe in this case. This is the one drawback. The other drawback is that it is also pretty huge. Like you see, this is the thickness of this assembly, like that. You see how thick it is. And it's heavy, it's electronics, it requires batteries, it requires controlling circuit, and all this stuff is completely not waterproof usually. So that's it. And another way in this is animatronics. What is animatronic is the next step when you do not just use the screen but you use some mechanical parts. Usually it's eyelids, but it also can be translated to the image themselves. For example, Zone RK3LY have an interesting implementation of mechanically changing eye image. Well, I already mentioned that person in my other lecture. The Willow Creative in Twitter have some animatronics with their eyes, and also on Willow Creative, by the way, there are some pure mechanical animatronics, because there is animatronics that can be puppeteered directly by the performer's face or maybe other stuff, so you can use electronic and servo drives and controllers and all that stuff. Or you can try to make it the old school way without electronics, with pure mechanically controlled movements, and it's possible to make eyes move pure mechanical. For example, I used a method when I attached the eyes to the eye assembly to the glasses, and the performer put on the glasses and then the mask, and the glasses wasn't strictly connected, so there was some room, and the performer could actually mimic the eye movement, for example. And there is another Twitter account where the performer actually made eyes moved with their face. That's not the main version of eye movement, that was a different version of eye movement. So this is almost animatronics, and usually animatronics requires a lot of space, and it requires some extra weight. And again, it can be moved on the mask. For example, the eyebrows can move, or eyelashes can also move by this animatronics, but also animatronics can be implemented in the eyes themselves to add some special effects, to change pictures on the fly, something like that. And the biggest drawback of the stuff is that it requires engineering skills, so you cannot just think it and call it a day. You will have to actually design it, and design it properly. So this is the most element that I wanted to mention, all that variants. Of course, there can be some smaller ideas, some more obscure ideas that are not widely used. Well, because this stuff evolves, and as any engineering stuff, there may be new ideas, new methods. But this is probably the method that you probably will encounter if you would try to do the mask. So there are quite a few of them. And again, ease of making is if you are a maker, that how easy it would to make it, how tiresome, how elaborate is the method of creating this kind of eyes. The geometry is what geometry can be implemented with a certain method. For example, photo paper is either flat or hollow, and resin eyes are spherical. And animatronic can be flat, can be spherical, and electronic are basically flat. Thickness is how much space those kind of method would require you to resolve inside the mask. Weight is how it is the weight of the eyes themselves. So, for example, painted eyes have almost no weight, while resin eyes are pretty heavy. Waterproofness, again, is it waterproof, or you will have to specially treat, or you even cannot make it waterproof at all, and how it would look underwater. So paper eyes, the eyes made of water paper or made of stickers would look good underwater, while the electronic eyes would just get destroyed, and glass-looking eyes like this would look a bit strange. The mask styles, the styles of the mask that in which mask styles you could implement it, and see-through, whether how is it possible to make it a see-through. For example, for photo paper it's cutouts, for painted eyes it's pre-drilled holes. Resin eyes cannot be made see-through. Glass-looking sculpted can be kit brush and collage, and eyes made of collage or made of layers can also be made see-through. And mesh and see-through are basically see-through from the start. So this is what the summarize. And as a quick bonus, this is my process of making a glass-looking eye in 2012. For one of my masks, this is the close-up look for that eye, and it is basically cut out of the out of photo paper. Then I used this black see-through films. Here you can actually see how see-through this film is when it puts against the light surface. Well, and this is the dome. At that time I tried to use the bottle, the PET bottle, with the soda bottle with those curved part. I used that part, cut out that part for this, and cut out something like this glass, this element, and I put this round iris, prepared round iris at the back to this stuff, painted it with, it was a white paint, and glued, and after there was a paint I glued this with a hot glue, and then glued all this assembly inside the mask. By the way, later I found out that there is actually a white hot glue, and in case of this I used the white hot glue for the sclera. And the rest is, well, pretty close to this old eye making process. Again, thank you for being today with me. I understand that this is a lot of material, and you probably watched this in several times, but I hope that you get a lot of inspiration. Again, this presentation will be linked down below. You can watch it, you can read all that stuff. You can also find the links to certain Twitter accounts in the stuff. All the watermarks I left, it's not a watermark, it's actually a text, so you can copy paste it to your browser. This in particular is the link to my Telegram account, where all that stuff is also featured in a certain sub chat. And again, thank you for being with me. I hope this was inspirational. You find a lot of ways to how make your Kigurumi masks more interesting and the eyes for your Kigurumi masks more elaborate. And thank you. See you at the next lecture. And as always, bye bye.